everybody. Welcome to Project 6. This is 6B, the part where we get to talk about peer support in pain care, but we get to do it with our resident expert this quarter, which is Mary Wing. And we're so delighted you're here to join us. Mary comes from down under, from Australia. So it's morning for her time and evening for us here in North America. And I'm going to turn this over to Joletta, who's going to introduce Mary to us, and let's get rolling.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you so much for being here with us, Mary. I'm so excited to have you on today and to dive deeply into peer support and learn from all of your experiences. Just for some background, I met Mary on the interwebs initially, kind of through pain patient advocacy work and patient partner and peer support type stuff. And then we are both on the International Association for the Study of Pain's Global Alliance of Pain Patient Advocates Task Force. So I actually got to meet Mary last year at our first in-person meeting, which is pretty impressive since she's in Australia. But Mary, I'm hoping that maybe you will give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself into how you entered into this peer support world, because I know you didn't intentionally get into it.
No, I don't think any of us with chronic pain intentionally get into anything. We sort of stumble into it or suddenly find ourselves in it or something. I developed chronic pain in 2004 after spinal surgery, not an uncommon thing to happen. And I was floundering around, I won't go into all that detail, for several years. And in 2007, I started a university course which was to do with chronic condition management, and in particular from a self-management aspect. I don't think there was one thing to do with self-management and peer support that we didn't study actually, and it was very informative. And I also attended a course that was one of the standard courses that you may or may not be familiar with. They run for 6 weeks. And they're run by peers, and they are generic chronic condition management courses. All right, that's what I did. And I will never to this day forget the relief I felt when I walked into a room full of people I knew weren't going to judge me, and that actually I wasn't expecting that. I went along there to see if I could learn something that might help me to do better than I was. And this overwhelming sense of relief hit me, and I did really well. It was a good 6-week course, and the peer support was amazing. And I sort of stayed with that ever since. I eventually facilitated those same courses and for 4 years face-to-face until they stopped running. And then I did 4 years in the US and Canada. And I only stopped because I got too busy with everything else last year. So you have to say no somewhere. So yes, I have just found it an absolutely amazing thing. I think it's very underrated. I don't think a lot of health professionals realise that peer support can be so valuable. Eventually I started through a one support group out of one of the pain clinics in Adelaide. I was asked if I would volunteer to do that, and I did it, and it was amazingly successful. And we've now got 3, and we meet once a month. They meet once a month. I've got an amazing team of facilitators who help me out, and we've now had to move on to Zoom, of course, because we can't face to face. So now we're having 2 meetings a month on Zoom instead of 3 meetings in different places of the city, and that's working out quite well. They can come to either or both, and they're enjoying it, we're enjoying it, and we still get our guest speakers. They're happy to come along on Zoom, the health professionals, and we are very well supported, I must say, so we're very lucky.
That is wonderful, and I want to get into some more of the logistics of the Adelaide Pain Support Network that you started up and facilitate. But I want to, before I forget, get back to that sense of relief that you felt when you first went to pain support yourself, because I think that is so important and so hard to put into words, but is so unbelievably meaningful, and probably for me one of the most meaningful aspects of peer support was just that that sense of, I am not in this alone. I am not crazy. I am not, you know, I'm not at fault. It wasn't even about being at fault, but I'm not being judged for this. No one is holding this against me, and I don't have to defend myself. And I think being in a space with people where you can feel that is incredibly meaningful and powerful. And I was just hoping maybe you'd say a few more words about that.
Yeah, well, look, I had been well supported by a couple of doctors who knew me before I developed chronic pain. And so that was really good. But I still went through what we all go through with a couple of different specialists with the, you know, it's your fault, you're not doing enough. If you were doing more, then you'd be better, and, you know, you'll be better in 12 months. And when I wasn't, I was made to feel so small for a whole half hour. And I don't know to this day why I stayed there. So then when you do meet with someone who's not going to judge you after those experiences, it's I think that's why it's so overwhelming. And then it was a fairly large group for that sort of thing too, funnily enough, and everyone stayed the distance. And so we really had a really amazing sort of peer support thing going. And some of us kept on meeting after that for quite a few years, just for a little coffee break or something like that. And I think that everyone benefited from that. I saw it in other people, and I definitely felt a whole lot better about everything by the time I finished that course. It got me moving. Everyone encouraged you to do that, and you set goals each week that were achievable, and everyone got their goal achieved mostly, or you change it to something else and then you achieve that. But as long as you get that sense of achievement, and that little sense of achievement builds and builds and builds, you know, I can actually have a life. I can have a life in pain as well. So, and then the pain sort of is always still there. It just hasn't gone anywhere. It's probably worse if anything, but you've still got this sort of amazing life along with it. So it's a very different one than you envisaged having, but nevertheless, a really enjoyable one. So yeah,
I love that. I've referred to it before as how the pain might not change, but the life around it gets so much bigger, and that makes a huge difference. I love that you talked about movement, especially since this is the Genius PT podcast. So a lot of PTs are trying to get the people in pain that they're working with to move more. And one of the things that we talked about in the first episode of this is how this can be a wonderful adjunct or support for the healthcare system itself and for clinicians themselves. That this can be somewhere where the messages that they're trying to get across are reinforced. And you mentioned that you have really good support for what you're doing in Adelaide. And I was wondering if you could talk about that relationship and that support a little bit, just to kind of paint a picture of what that might look like.
Well, we've always had good support. We seem to be fairly unique. I think we're very lucky. It's because I suppose we were asked to start the group, and we are affiliated mainly because we need somewhere to meet with various hospitals, or in one case, a university. So the people support us very well, and they're quite happy to come and provide guest speakers and, you know, give us a bit of time like that, which the group loves. They love to think that they're important enough that someone will come and talk to them. And there's no judgment there either from the health professionals. Some of them have already done pain management courses, so they're quite up with pain management, and we just continue on with that. And if they come and they haven't done that, then the others will encourage them, teach them, and whatever. And we ended up, now, how can I put this? We started out with an association who provided no support, no financial support or anything, and we were in a bit of a mess. So our primary health network came to our rescue, and they financially support us, and that enables us to do what we want to do, which is basically run peer support groups instead of worrying about where our next cup of coffee is going to come from. We've sort of got the money for printing, we've got the money to train facilitators. We've even got the money to do other things that crop up. Like last year, we all did a one-day, what they call an accidental counsellor course. So if you come across someone who's suicidal, and we have done that, then you have a range of things that you can do, and also some places that you can send them to or recommend they might go to, and certain steps that you can take. You're not turning into a counsellor, it just teaches you what to do if you are an accidental counsellor. So we have the money to do these kind of things because we're so well supported, and I think we're very lucky and we do appreciate it. And last year we became homeless in the city because where we were, the people had to move out of where they were, and it was going to be awfully expensive for the city group to go anywhere. And Lorimer Mosley, who everyone would know, came to our rescue and said, you can use our meeting room. So we've been in there, and that's been amazing too. So,
Very good.
as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
That is wonderful. You mentioned the facilitator training that you do. Can you speak to that a little bit more? One of the things that we had talked about in that first episode as well is that without facilitation, these groups, like where it might just be people living with pain that get together, it can become like a negative downward spiral, and it could become a really unhelpful experience for people. So facilitation and being able to moderate a group that's coming together that's with people that have chronic conditions or chronic pain is really important. So
yeah, but you are right. There are groups that do that, and I think to this day, support groups, when people see the word support group, they sometimes still have that same impression that it will be something negative, both health professionals and patients. But what we do is we take but we have a sort of a structure which is flexible, just in case something crops up, and then we need to sort of go off at a bit of a tangent because someone's got a problem or someone else. They will help each other with problem solving, so we may go off at a tangent. But our loose structure is that we will either have a guest speaker. If we don't, we'll just get stuck into maybe a video on pain management, or then we will discuss that. Obviously, we do goal setting every month. I think that underpins all pain management. So we're very big on goal setting and making smart goals achievable. And then we have a break, and we have fairly good breaks, so they can talk to each other because there's that peer support coming in again. And we always finish on a positive note. We've pinched the small victories idea from Pain BC, and oh my gosh, we have had some of the most amazing big victories that have happened during that activity. It's been quite amazing. We had a young girl come in a couple of years ago after Christmas, and she just said her small victory for the month was that over Christmas she had weaned herself off all her codeine because she wanted to go overseas, and she didn't think that she'd be able to, I think it would be an issue because of being an opioid, etc. And she didn't want to have to take it anyway. So, and she also had a university course she wanted to finish, so she accelerated that, finished that, stayed off the codeine, went overseas, and as far as I know, she's still there. She was still there 12 months later.
Wow.
I have no idea where she is now. There have been some rather amazing stories come out during that time. We have a married couple who both use power wheelchairs, and they had, I don't think, any sort of peer support of any kind at all. And they had this ambition to catch a tram. And they were a bit hesitant to do this for quite a long time. And the group, with that peer support there again, when they were setting their goals, someone said, why don't you set one to get the tram this month, Oh, I don't know. Anyway, they set that goal, and of course they came back the next month. Not only had they caught the tram once, they were basically catching it everywhere, everywhere that they could, and they even caught a bus. So that's been a really big thing for them, because not only has it been a good thing and a good experience, but it's also saving them a lot of money, because we have a thing over here called access cabs. I'm not quite sure whether you've got an equivalent there, but the government supplies a certain amount of money for wheelchairs to go into a cab, but there's always a gap to pay. Mm-hmm. So, and they can get public transport during certain hours of the day for nothing. So that's worked out really well for them. They do it for all their appointments, and they do it for our meetings, and yeah, it's very exciting. So yeah, we've had some really great stories come out of there.
Well, it sounds like it opened the world up quite a bit. Both of
Oh.
those stories that you told, which was before they even started the group, was unimaginable for them, which
That's
is,
right.
just brilliant for the
Yes,
group
I'm
support to
going to,
help spur them
well,
on.
yeah, I'm thinking of their privacy without going into more detail, but I could tell quite a few stories about them, and it has been an amazing journey for them. And they've even been able to help other people in the group out with things like access to funding and things like that. So I've also got a couple of things here that I could read, if that's okay.
Beautiful.
From one of my facilitators wrote this just right out the blue on our chat. It's nice to be able to contribute after years of thinking that I was no longer useful because my pain stopped me from doing so much. I caught up with 4 of my former work colleagues for lunch yesterday, and it was lovely to be able to share that I now feel like I'm living a more purposeful and fulfilling life where I can contribute. So, and there's another one there from another facilitator who said the same thing. And as far as that training goes, Jo, we basically get trained in group work. The people who train us are the same people who used to train Stanford programs, so they're very good. One of them is particularly good at being a terribly difficult participant and all that kind of thing. We have a lot of fun as well, and they trained in group work and in the particular activities that we do, like they're trained to do the goal setting and how not to have someone talk for half an hour right in the middle of it and all that sort of stuff, so that works out quite well. Yeah, we do that usually once a year, and we all do it, so we get refreshers here.
Nice. Mary, I've so enjoyed listening to your stories. I live in Canada, and I live in a small town of maybe 20,000 people. How does one get a group like this started? I mean, do you have to live in a big city? How did you get it started, and how would somebody get it started?
Well, our city's not that big, but I guess we were lucky in the fact that one of the pain units, I was on our statewide pain strategy committees, so I knew quite a few people, and so I think the support came from them asking us to start the group in the beginning, and we advertised ourselves. That was hard because at that stage we had no financial support. We did advertise ourselves in a tiny little thing in the paper, but we also got some referrals from the pain unit itself. But people are generally a little bit hesitant to come along. As I said, I think support groups in general sometimes have a bad name.
Yeah.
And so I suppose for every 20 that they ask, we might get one. I don't know, but we've got some people that have been there since day one, quite a few actually. So that's worked out well. And then they had to move because they pulled the hospital down. So we set up another group. We kept the original one in the city, and then we followed them and set up another one in the western suburbs, and then a new pain management or rehab management set up in another hospital out north, and they asked us if we'd like to set a group up out there. So we did, and they're extremely supportive with everything. So I think we are lucky, and it is hard to get off the ground from scratch. But I think the most important thing to do is, even if you get 1 or 2 people, word of mouth is quite good. But I think the most important thing to do, of course, is to make it with some kind of structure.
Right.
And it's the same. You can start an online one, but an online one needs good facilitation. I know of one online group that's degenerated basically into a bit of a dumping ground, and and are looking for the silver bullet type.
Yeah. There's a lot of hopeless type of support groups that just people go and want to they're looking for the next fix or just a place to kind of commiserate a little bit, and rightly so. It's a tough place to be, but that's not the kind of support we're talking about here. No, and if a person's had a particularly bad experience, or like it may not even be pain related, then everyone will commiserate with that. Someone may have a death in the family or whatever. So there again, you've got that peer support as well, and they understand that you're trying to cope with that as well as pain.
And whereas most people sort of wouldn't even have the pain on the radar, I don't think.
So it's really interesting, because I think what Gilletta said last month when we talked was that for this to be effective, it really has to be peer-to-peer, right? And that there has to be sort of that commonality. And yet I think what I've heard you say now is that you were invited to start this by the medical community. So it's almost, it sounds to me like the medical community has to drive it and then set it up so that it becomes peer-led. Am I hearing that right?
That's basically what happened with us, but I think that's very unusual. I think I haven't heard of that happening with anyone else. It did make it a bit easier, although we went through some pretty tough times that I won't go into now. I can't go into them here. But the thing is, it goes both ways, because the people that are providing the peer support, they get benefits too. There was a study done at Johns Hopkins in 2018, and it says that people giving peer support might also experience special benefits, feeling good about giving back and being part of something that matters, feeling stronger and having more faith they can deal with hard times. And it does go both ways, definitely. Right. Because when we're having a bad day, we have to go. If we're facilitating a meeting, we have to go. And I can say that honestly, every time I felt like that, I've come home feeling better. So I might crash a few hours later.
Right.
The next day I'm okay again. So it works. And you improve social skills, and you can learn better ways to communicate, and you can remain engaged in a peer support system, and that promotes recovery, well-being, and all sorts of things. It just becomes part of you, I think, after a lot of years of being with it. But yes, I can see that if you don't have that support from the medical community, it is harder. Right. I do know people that have set up support groups for other things that haven't had that, and they have been quite successful. But yeah.
And is there? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that highlights how just the way that we think about peer support and look at peer support, that if we think about it as part of the therapeutic plan, like all of those benefits that you just talked about, Mary, when people can go through this program and then potentially become a facilitator themselves, how meaningful and purposeful that is for those people. And it gives them another part of their life back. It gives them a different social role and all of these things that might have been missing, that seeing this as part of the therapeutic plan and then having that co-creation piece, I think, is really valuable. And the more that we could promote and foster that, where it is a supportive and reciprocal relationship between healthcare systems or professionals and peer support, to me, that gives the best of both of those worlds. For Endless Possibilities Initiative, we're completely peer-to-peer support, but also, like Mary went back to school, I went back to school too. I think it's different when you have someone starting a program that has that educational background too, that is incredibly valuable, but that if you don't have that piece, that having those professionals come in to be able to facilitate and financially support with the guest lectures and all of that is really important too. I cut you off, Carolyn. What were you about to say?
I guess my other question was, again, the nitty-gritty how-tos kind of part. And so how do facilitators become trained then? I mean, is there a process to that? Is there a program for that? Did you kind of luck into people who taught you how to facilitate, or was it because you had gone to the Stanford program? And again, I'm in Canada. Is there more of an international? You guys are both involved in the IAS program in the steering committee to get this going. Do we foresee that there will be a facilitator training program that may be accredited through IAS, for example?
Well, I don't know. We're still in the fairly early stages of that, so whether that would come along later, I'm not sure. And of course, we've all been derailed by not being able to have the Congress this year as well. We were lucky because I knew people that I could ask to train us there again, because I had contact them. They had originally trained me, and so that I was lucky there again. I think that we have been incredibly lucky. I guess it's a matter. There must be people that can do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you put it this way, anyone who is good at group work can probably train. I mean, the principles of self-management and that kind of thing that you're trying to sort of get across in your groups are fairly universal.
Mm-hmm.
Goal setting, pacing, problem solving, brainstorming, all those kind of things. So it's sort of, it's good if you've got someone that can train that has already been doing it for some years. But I guess if you know those principles and you know them well, it's something that someone could put a training program together for.
Okay.
And that would be very beneficial, I think.
So it'd be lovely, wouldn't it, if the task force that the two of you are on could create some sort of guidelines around developing facilitation training, because it sounds like, I like the structure you gave, a guest speaker, and then sort of setting goals. And I'm imagining that in the groups, you actually state your goals out loud for that month. Yes. My goals are, right?
Yes, it is. We have, we call them an action plan, and we have certain, as I said, SMART goals. We use those principles to set them by and make sure they're achievable, because, it's no good. We've had like a man who desperately wanted to get back into reading, and he had, so he decided to set 5 minutes. On 3 days, he was going to go outside and read this book for 5 minutes, because he was an avid reader and he got right out of the habit. And I think that happens to us when we're in pain, because we can't concentrate. And he came back the next month and he said, "Oh, I've been doing an hour at a time. It's amazing. I've read 3 books." So
nice.
Last time I heard from him, he was painting the house. So he's gone.
So he's done all right. Well,
it's amazing what can happen with that sense of achievement.
Right.
Just from a small 5-minute goal. And I see that all the time, a lot. Yeah.
One of the things I think is so important that you brought up too is with the two people that were using the tram and the bus again, and that goal becoming a goal in that peer support network, which might not be something that was ever elicited in a healthcare consultation. That might not be something that gets brought up in that type of environment, that might get brought up in peer support. And just to speak, so for the task force, right now we're establishing the entity that's going to live in perpetuity in engaging with IASP. So the entity will probably be able to take something like this on. But in the near term, I'm not sure how much of it we can tackle, but I don't want people to think that they can't start something without that guidance.
Right.
Because just starting having those conversations with people in your local community that are tied with a healthcare system or a pain clinic or a PT clinic can start something happening that can be really beneficial for that community. And there's resources out there to start having those conversations too.
Yeah, and I think maybe having those resources handy could be so helpful for people as they're kind of thinking about it. And go ahead, Mary.
Oh, that's what I was just going to say. What Joe said is there are resources out there, and I think there's usually it might take a bit of digging around, but there's usually someone somewhere that we'll find someone else that will actually give it a go to get it started, and maybe with a bit of support, a bit of backup, so that they don't feel alone, so to speak. Because that was one thing, we never felt alone. And when we didn't have any tea and coffee or any money, the pain unit bought us some.
Nice.
So that we'd be able to conduct a meeting reasonably civilized.
So that brings up a question on my part is, can you give us any idea of what you kind of think a budget would be for people? Because I know looking at it from a healthcare provider standpoint, walking into a group or people or even donating my clinic space, just thinking about how I could help with that. If I was talking to my partner, if I was somebody in a healthcare facility, the first thing people ask is, how much space do you need and how much is it going to cost?
Exactly.
Right off the bat. And I'm just kind of wondering, ballpark figure, what do you like? what were your needs when you kind of knew what those needs were? Sometimes we walk into anything stuff and we don't have any idea what we need till we find out, like, oh, I should have thought about that.
That's exactly what happened to us. Yes, we had some other, I had some other facilitators, and we had several meetings and got ourselves sort of organised with what we'd need. I can't. It's not much use me giving you dollars, because our dollars are totally different to yours.
It's pretty close to Canada, so go ahead.
It's
disgusting. We probably it's the training is the thing that costs the most.
okay.
You obviously need the basics. You need some printing. You need some tea, coffee, biscuits, those kind of things that make people feel more comfortable, especially the caffeine bit.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's basically the training is the most expensive part. And printing, I'm talking basic printing now in a group, that you might print out some things, information for them, or we print out templates for them to make their action plans on, because it's just that little bit easier, and prompt them into the right, especially if they're new to it and they've only, it might be their first or second meeting, that kind of printing. But then again, you can exist without that. You don't have to have any of that. But we also, because we can afford it, we get other printing done. We just had quite a lot of new flyers printed, but we can't put them anywhere yet because we're all locked up. So
Right.
getting a bit anxious. As a matter of fact, I picked them up, and my co-facilitators hadn't seen them. We had a Zoom meeting one day, and I said, Mary, can you please go and get the flyer and hold it up so we can see what it looks like? So I went through each page.
Oh. So much time and effort. You like to see your fruits of that work, right? Yeah.
Yes. One of my facilitators, a guy, did all the wording in it, and he's done an amazing job. And I got onto the printing site, Vista Print. I don't know if you've got that over there. And and they had a template there, and I just used that. I've done a lot of that kind of work in my time, but it made it a lot easier using a template, although I did get their software's a bit dodgy, and one time I lost it all. I had to do it all again.
Oh no.
But anyway, the end result was worth it, so yeah. So yes, it is difficult. I'm not quite sure. It is hard for me to imagine what it would be like, although when we started we did lack support apart, but we did tell people we didn't have the support, and then they helped. So
nice.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any final comments? And I'm going to wrap up and just thank Mary so much for taking her time this evening and this morning and her time frame to share her wisdom with us. Joletta, any further comments? Or
My comment is that what I first wrote down was make sure Mary gets to all her notes.
And so we have to ask Mary, is there anything left unsaid?
I have to say, we only use evidence-based materials with whatever we're talking about, videos, all evidence-based, and if anyone starts to go off on a tangent with anything, it's sort of, they understand, it's cut off fairly quickly.
Okay.
I did want to mention that the amazing success of Alcoholics Anonymous. When you research peer support, that'll come up, and they've got about 2 million members now, and that's been going since 1934. So, that's what peer support can do. And that was just started by 2 guys. They had nothing to start it with, no money. They did it in their house.
Right.
So it can be done from scratch. It's probably just that little bit more difficult. And I think we covered the informal support with the online groups, coffee meetups and things like that. But most things need careful moderation so they don't turn into a dumping ground. And I know what I was going to address. You were talking about the use of the word pain in support groups. We discussed that at length before we started, and the reason we left pain in there was so that if people Googled, they'd probably be more likely to find us. Okay. So that was the method in our madness there. We decided to leave pain in there for that reason. So, and there have been, as you addressed the other day, Jo, there have been a lot of studies done that are positive for peer support. Canary Health did one at Stanford, and there again, it was mainly, as you found out, not so much for pain, but diabetes has been studied a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they found decreased depression symptoms, decreased hypoglycemic symptoms, improved medication adherence, reduced hospitalisation, reduced healthcare costs, and a lowered A1C by 1.27%. So that's all really good. And I think that peer support gives hope. And the other big thing it can do is to allay fear, because fear is the biggest driver of chronic pain, I think.
Right.
And the peer support sort of relaxes people, and that fear, they see other people doing things and they think, well, perhaps I can too. I think that's so important.
I love that.
Yeah.
Seeing
I do
other
too.
people doing things, maybe I can too. Just seeing that is so powerful.
Purpose. I love that word too.
Purpose. Susan, do you have any final thoughts or questions?
I don't have any final thoughts other than thank you for describing the group and how the things that are working and the ways that you've gone to and learned from your own experiences as to how to prevent or work around the things that you know could be dangerous or harmful to people. And but I love all the very powerful words of purpose and supporting. And and I think you were just telling the story about people can see somebody else has gone further than where they were before. But I think also probably in some ways it seems like the group can support each other through each other's own journey, because some people can do really well for a while and have a setback. And I can only imagine that peer support can be so valuable to helping them be able to see that you had a setback, but you've been there before. And with our help and our support, you can get there again, like you were talking about with the fear. And I just see so much power in this.
We do encourage people to have a setback plan. I had to go to mine last week. I had the worst flare-up I've had for 10 years last week. And so I went to a bit of a setback plan with my fingers crossed, I must admit, because anyway, I'm back to normal, so normal for me.
Yeah, very good. So I'm gonna challenge physiotherapy clinics. I mean, a lot of our listeners will be physiotherapists, to start to look at our own communities and see if we in some way can be that prodding kind of element that Mary had in the medical community to say, hey, do you want to start something like this up? When you find a patient who may have that passion or that purpose, to maybe encourage them and to maybe provide, as Susan said, some space in your clinic once a month to maybe supply some printing support. And I mean, those are things that we as physiotherapists can help with and can help facilitate. And
or in the meantime, at least the Zoom platform.
Well, yes. So once we get back into clinic, that's a whole other story, isn't it?
Right.
You can also ask, people are usually quite prepared to make we used to in the beginning, maybe a $2 or a $1 donation if they can. Yeah. You just sort of put it there in case they can't afford it, so that they don't feel bad. You just put it by the tea and coffee, and people are usually happy to sort of do that. That's how we existed for quite a while. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess just to wrap up again, Mary, thank you again for sharing your story. And what really struck me was, and I've heard Joletta say it many, many times as well, this sense of relief that, I think what we're talking about here is almost back to some of Kristen Neff's work, Dr. Neff's work around self-compassion. And I think often in persistent pain, we lose the ability to be kind to ourselves and have compassion for ourselves. And when we walk into peer support, what is one of the key characteristics of self-compassion is common humanity. For us all to realize that we're all in this together and we all are suffering in different ways. And when you walk into a group of like-minded sufferers, all of a sudden you're home and you can start to be kind to yourself, and maybe you can start to have some hope and set some goals. So that's an amazing story, an amazing opportunity that you've given people.
I really like that. I like that word, home. I think that's...
Yeah, me too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mary, this has been very enjoyable. We can't wait for a month.
Amazing.
Month. It's not quite a month from now, is it? Does anybody have the date in front of them?
June the 12th, is that?
Oh yeah, so it is about a month. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yep, June 12th.
Is that the right date? Before
it might not be.
Let's all, we're so organized in this moment.
I know, right?
It's a Sunday. I know that, right? It's a Sunday evening for
Sunday,
us. Monday morning for Mary.
June the 14th.
June the 14th. So Sunday evening, June the 14th, join us.
Or Monday morning, June the 15th.
If you're in Australia, join us too, and join Mary, and you will have the opportunity to ask Mary questions about peer support and her experiences, and maybe get some guidance if that's something that you think your persons in pain in your community could benefit from. So thank you again, Mary. Really appreciate it. Gillette and Susan, it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you
will
so
talk
much.
soon.